This podcast is part of the Everyday Heroes Podcast Network, the network for first responders and those who support them.
Happy 4th of July! Happy 4th of July, Laura.
Happy 4th of July.
Yeah,
One of my favorite holidays.
It's the Scissors and Scrubs edition of 4th of July.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have really exhausted all of the 4th of July topics we could, so we're going back.
Way back.
To the birth of our nation, 1776.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to cover nursing and war wounds from the American Revolution.
Yes.
Why?
And some doctors.
Why do I love the American Revolution so much?
Because we got our freedom?
Because it's an underdog story.
Oh, okay.
We were these little shits on this side of the water.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't take it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We took on Goliath
Mm-hmm.
and we won.
Mm-hmm.
Boom,
I
boom.
do love an underdog.
Shot heard around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Was the start of the revolution. Schoolhouse Rock, 70s, nobody remember?
No.
The Minutemen were ready on the move. It's like
I know. Don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
One if by land, two if by sea.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were these little shits. We got it together. We united the 13 colonies, took on England, the biggest power in the world, and we won.
Mm-hmm.
And not only did we win, we went on to become the most powerful nation in the world for a time. So, all right. So back in the day, we had nurses.
We did.
No nurses, just nurses.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about? Do you want me to talk about the role of nurses first?
Sure.
Do you want to talk about battlefield injuries?
It's like an overview. It's like talk about nurses.
Okay.
I guess.
So women of the Revolution. There really wasn't per se, how shall we say it, official nurses back in the day. Women were camp followers. All right, so you had the troops. Boom, boom, boom. They're moving around, and here come the wives and the prostitutes and the kids, and they're all following the troops. And they would have roles in these troops because by following the troops, they would get food, they would get be able to be with their husbands, and they were giving needs to the troops that the government could, as far as not those kind of needs, Laura. Maybe some of those needs, but they would do laundry.
Oh,
they would be doing the laundry, and they would sew the uniforms and clean the uniforms and keep the men relatively clean. So you could have a shirt cleaned for 2 shillings.
Oh.
Woolen breeches, vests, and overalls for 2 shillings each. A linen vest and breeches for 1 shilling each. Linen overalls, 1 shilling and 6 pence each. Stockings, and handkerchiefs, 6 pence each. So they would get paid for these, and this is how they would, because you figure.
Is that song, Sixpence, None the Wiser? Sixpence?
I don't know.
What was that?
I think you're just making shit up.
Kiss me under the pale moonlight. Do you remember it was like in like the 90s, like it was like Sixpence None the Richer. Sixpence.
Oh, that was the name of the band.
Yeah, right?
Yes, not the name of the song.
Oh, all right, but it was Sixpence.
Well, because England had all the weird money.
Right.
All right, so at this time we're still kind of English. Okay. So, and they also wanted to make sure that the women didn't wash the clothes in the same rivers men drank out of, because that would be disgusting. They did cooking and other chores. When soldiers entered the army, they formed messes. History.org explains. These messes were generally composed of 6 men who shared housekeeping chores, including getting water, chopping wood, and cooking meals. However, on occasion, women of the regiment earned extra money by cooking for men who could afford to pay them. So, there is a really, 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 really good show called Turn. And it is about the Revolution, unbeknownst to me, and it's a true story. George Washington had spies. I mean, I don't know why that's a big shock.
Turncoat?
He was yes. So this poor guy just wanted to be a cabbage farmer, but his cabbages didn't go well at all that year. He just wanted to fucking do his cabbages, have his wife, call it a day. Here comes the revolution. His friends are all in the revolution. One of his friends is really hot in the revolution. And they use him because his town is being held by the English. Okay. So they use him to go back and forth to tell them what's going on, and he does it. It's actually really, really good. They get into camp followers in it. That's how it all ties into Turn. Okay. The guy who plays Elton John's best friend in Rocket Man is the lead character. What's the guy's name? What's the writing team It was Elton John and Bernie something.
Oh,
I can't think of
Bernie
Toppin. Bernie
Sanders.
Yes. Elton John and Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders and his mittens. Yeah. Okay. So then they also had nurses.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the opportunity to earn money, nursing was a dangerous and low reputation job.
As it always was.
Officers therefore alternately bribed or threatened.
Oh, Jesus.
That sounds like today. Or threatened women.
If you don't get this case done,
I'm not going to feed you if you don't fucking nurse. By enticing them with payment or taking away food from women who refuse to be nurses. Imagine, that's pretty rough. Are you going to do this? I'm going to starve you.
Yeah. I mean, they took our tables away to eat at.
Yes, they did. We're in these little tiny desks, which I would really
And
like.
they seem to be getting less and less desks.
Less and less desks, and the desks are closer and closer together. Now we're all sitting in circles, so just give us our desks back. And, forced overtime and everything. So, yep, they have taken food away and they bribed them. And there was quite a bit of leeway when it came for who could be a nurse.
Wow.
Whether it be overlooking their lack of medical experience. So here's some woman washing laundry and they're like,
you're going to nurse.
It's
You're
you.
not going to eat.
Yeah, you do a mean mending. You're coming over. Or even occasionally British associated nurses. Now here she is. I had her name and here it is because I think I used this exact article. Shocker that there were a lot of people on this side that didn't want to be Americans. I hope they all fucking went home. Because if you weren't on it, you should have gone back. So they were supporting the British Army over here.
That people moved to the colonies and they were supporting.
People who were born in the colonies but didn't believe we should become independent. They wanted the protection of England. One such loyalist was Elizabeth Brewer.
Elizabeth.
She found a unique way to support her king.
Wow.
Bitch. She left her post as a nurse for the British soldiers in New Jersey and defected, quote unquote, to the Continental Army. After passing interrogation, I would love to know what that interrogation was. Can you clean a bedpan? She was permitted to nurse for the revolutionary side. 2 months later, she's discovered and charged with espionage, but they don't talk about what happened to her, which I would love to have known what happened.
Yeah, they definitely.
Oh,
she's
what's the other one there? Arnold.
Yeah, they're probably hanging next to each other.
Benedict Arnold. I couldn't remember his first. Benedict. He's another fucker. Okay, so Martha Washington and Abigail Adams both served as nurses during the Revolutionary War. Martha carried supplies to soldiers from Mount Vernon. She traveled to war zones with her husband and set up sewing circles with officers and wives.
Oh, sewing circles.
One witness recounts, I never in my life knew a woman so busy from the early morning until late at night, as was Lady Washington, providing comforts for the sick soldiers. I mean, she was one hell of a first lady, wasn't she? And then you get number 2. Yeah, Abigail also served as a nurse, and she supplied and delivered as well as ammunition producer. Fucking Abigail. I mean, it must have really been hard living in Martha's shadow.
Yeah.
Okay, so some historians believe that women's participation in the American Revolution contributed to the emerging role of Republican motherhood, which assigned women to the responsibility for the moral training of their sons for citizenship, which led to the expansion of educational opportunities for women. Whatever. So, the Revolutionary War was a pivotal point in reestablishing the role of men and women, particularly in the Army and the workforce. Nursing, in particular, proved to be a demanding but rewarding responsibility for men and women during the Revolution.
Okay.
So, it says nursing conditions of the Revolutionary War. So, we have organization. In 1775, General Horatio Gates of the Continental Army told G.W., also known as George Washington, that the sick suffered much for want of good female nurses. Notice he didn't say male.
Oh, they only want female nurses. Come on.
So Washington's like, all right, we need nurses. So he approves 1 nurse per 10 patients. People complain today. For 6 to 1. Well, she had 10 to 1.
4 to 1.
Well, 4 to 1. This is 10 to 1. And then you had 1 head hag, also known as 1 matron, but chief nurse.
It's me.
Laura's the head hag. She was assigned to 100 soldiers.
Oh,
to
Jesus.
oversee. And then Congress also permitted hospitals to be organized. At times, certain hospitals provided care and provisions for nurses and their children. Oh. So I guess if your husband's off to war fighting for our freedom and shit gets real at home and the Hessians come over and take over, you can have your kids with you and you're all set. So this is a big expense to the Army, and what was happening is a lot of the nurses weren't even getting paid. And
they would just get to live there and
they would get there, but
or something.
they wound up having to fight for it. And I think I get that. I get into that in one of the women I talk about because they had to fight to get their money. Because the male doctors were paid $40 a month.
Whopping.
The nurses, how much? $5?
$1?
Close, $2.
Oh, $2.
But this was eventually raised to $8 after the fight, and that was to encourage more women to volunteer. If nurses served for the British, they were getting 13 shillings a month.
Now, we keep saying this. If you give them more money, we'll get more people.
Yeah,
okay.
But then
it
seems to be a concept.
Revolutionary War.
200 years later,
Okay,
200 and I don't know how many years later. We still can't figure that out.
Okay.
There were rations given to both soldiers and nurses, and you could have meat, bread, beans, veggies, fruit and veg, milk, rice, beer, molasses. What the fuck am I going to do with molasses?
I don't know, but we had a ton of them in Boston.
What am I going to do with it, though? Okay, molasses, candles, and soap. I guess you need candles so you can see.
Yeah.
Soap, I don't think many people used it.
Baked beans. Yeah, the molasses with the beans.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
There you go.
Maybe put it in your beer,
makes
too.
it taste better.
Sweeten up your beer. Yeah. All right, so they got some rank. All nurses had to confront the hostility of physicians and the belief that no decent woman would nurse a man outside her immediate family.
Oh.
I almost feel like we counted that now. Female nurses who were still considered civilians were not included in the military chain of command. They worked but sometimes this worked for them because they weren't held to the restrictions the military was held to, which gave them a little more leeway to get away with shit. And then other times it's harder because nobody took them serious because they weren't military personnel. However, there were some women who ran military hospitals and were given the title of captain. Oh. Which, when you're in a military that really isn't recognized by anybody, I don't know what that means because we hadn't been recognized by anybody yet because we hadn't won. No. So you're a captain in really a non-existent army. Okay, lifestyle. Being a nurse might have provided job security, but nurses were constantly faced with dangers. Laura, I think you talk about some of these dangers. Probably. Smallpox, fever, and other health risks. Surgeons and surgeon mates performed most of the skilled medical duties, which means the women in our always being treated fairly, we got all the custodial work, feeding and bathing, emptying chamber pots, which would be emptied right at the surgeon's mate. Yeah. Here you go. Cleaning hospital wards and occasionally cooking.
Oh, good.
Yeah. They also changed linens, swept, disinfected hospitals with vinegar. My mother used to make us clean with white vinegar. The house smelled like salad. I know. It's disgusting.
It's real clean.
It's gross. But I guess if that's all you had, they would comb hair.
We still do that. I hate combing people's hair.
You're on hair duty.
I hate combing people's hair.
I actually had a dream last night that my neighbor's kid, I had to comb the hair. It was full of lice.
Ew.
I think it's because I hate the kids. And were demanded, this is my favorite, because they were demanded to stay sober. You are not allowed to drink.
Oh, well, who's a nurse then? I mean, how are we getting anybody to be a nurse?
You know what? Nobody. You're giving them beer as part of their rations.
Right.
But yet they got to stay sober.
It. Give it to your husband.
Assholes. They provided many of the essential duties that kept the hospital camps running. So,
as we do.
So it's very clear that Revolutionary War nurses had a sucky life. Military personnel and medical professionals depended on each other, and it served as a good learning experience of future standards and procedures in military organization. You know what? They needed Dorothea Dix.
They needed a little
Clara.
Dorothea Dix.
Little Clara Barton on this. All right, so let me see if I have. I think you cover everything else. Okay. So they got creative with food.
Oh God!
A popular part of the patient's diet was warm pap. Milk in which oatmeal had been cooked and strained, into which beaten egg yolks, butter, and orange flavor were added. And beef tea and an extract of beef juices. Beef tea? Beef tea. Which I guess is a form of beef bouillon. Well, they just took the dead horse, out of the river, cooked him up.
Oh.
You know, because you know how good the standards were back in that day.
So they had you drink milk that they had strained oatmeal through.
And put in beaten egg yolks, butter, and orange flavor. And you'd take that with a side of beef tea with some extracted beef juices. And it doesn't really say where the beef came from.
And the nurses made this shit?
Yes. Oh. Yes, they did. It was a popular part of the patient's diet, Laura.
I didn't even like to bring the trays to the rooms because
they smell. It's that hospital food smell.
That.
Yep. It's always meatloaf with really bad green beans and some slop of
And
potato.
the people who couldn't chew.
Oh, the thickener?
No, the food would be all pureed.
Yeah.
But it would be like a gray pile, a white pile, and
There
a
was
green
literally a reason, Laura. I went right from surgical tech
Oh my God.
to circulator.
I hated doing that.
I skipped the whole floor in between.
Never mind.
So all I see now is
Beef
the
tea.
food coming through the OG tube, and that's enough for me.
Oh.
Yep, I'm good.
I can't
So
do it.
yeah, we're gonna have a nice warm side of pap to go with that.
Oh.
All right, so I'm gonna let you go over to your business, and then I'm gonna cover a few notable notes.
Okay.
Notable quotable potables.
Okay. So I kind of do like an overview.
All right.
All right. At the time of the Revolutionary War, there were only 2 hospitals in the colonies.
Okay, I think I talked about one of them.
So there's one is the medical department of the College of Philadelphia, which is now the University of Pennsylvania.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then there's King's College in New York City, which is now Columbia
Oh
University.
no, I had another one. Okay.
Up until the aftermath of the 1775 Battle of Bunker Hill, the Continental Army had no structured medical service.
Mhm.
After that battle, they realized, we need structured medical service.
Because everybody got
the shit
killed.
hit the fan.
Mhm.
The Second Continental Congress tried to establish the hospital department for the Army in July 1775, but there was so much infighting
Mhm.
that supplies and resources were in, like, wicked shortage, and attempts to enforce medical I'm losing my voice again. Attempts to enforce medical competencies among Army surgeons failed, so they wanted to get like everybody on the same page, all the surgeons to be able to have the same skills, and
Oh, it still hasn't worked.
just went right out the window. Yeah.
And we're still not there.
So what's all this arguing over? So they're trying to establish these hospitals. They're trying to establish medical services. All this infighting. So the 2 main arguments were the general hospitals versus field hospitals,
Mhm.
and then the training of the surgeons. So general hospitals. So there's those 2 general hospitals. They were so overrun. There was so many patients there that most of the patients died of infection.
Yeah.
Because they were
Yep.
just so overrun. And then the surgeons and the doctors started dying of infection because it was just so rampant.
Can you imagine how filthy they were?
No, there was no
Because this is
hygiene
before
there.
Florence Nightingale coming in with her septic
Yeah, she didn't
techniques.
clean everything. So
Yes.
it was just disgusting, filthy, and there was just people everywhere, and everybody was sick. So
And they're laying
everybody's
on
getting sick
hay and
dying.
shit and drinking pap.
And it was cheaper to run a few general hospitals as opposed to like many field
Mhm.
hospitals all over the place. And the surgeons at the field hospitals had more training.
I believe it because they were dealing with
I
it
mean-
constant at the hospitals.
Surgeons at the general hospitals had more training. The surgeons at the field hospitals were kind of like, hey, I'm a doctor. Like,
hey, look at that MD after my
Yeah.
name.
And then the arguments for the field hospitals, so there's many of them all over the place. They're not as overrun because there's a lot of them. But they're not really hospitals. They're like barns or
They're like
houses
tents where
that
people
they
are
took
injured
over.
and they're taking it.
Mm-hmm. So the sick or injured soldiers go to these little barns or houses, and they just are kept together, kind of. They didn't really have supplies there. They didn't have skilled physicians at the field hospitals. They were just kind of
Put there
put there.
because they didn't know what else to do with them.
Right. So there's a fight. Like, should we have general hospitals? Should we have field hospitals? What's better? And they couldn't get this shit together to
Mhm.
get a
Right.
service
hospital.
running.
Mhm.
So of the 3,500 doctors and surgeons in America at the time of the Revolutionary War, guess how many had medical degrees?
3.
400.
Wow.
Of the 3,500.
Yeah. So how are they called doctor?
Not sure. Not really sure how they got the title. They just called themselves surgeons. Like
I'm gonna-
barbers or surgeons.
I'm gonna
You
do
know,
that.
like
Hi, Nicole, MD. Nice
yeah.
to meet you.
Most had no experience with war injuries. Sanitation was basically non-existent at
Mhm.
that time.
Like I said, drag that horse out of the
Mhm.
water.
If someone had an injury to a limb, surgeons kind of automatically amped it. They
Whether it could
amputated
work
the
it or
limb,
not.
right? Because they knew it would get infected, so they'd have this like gory injury, and they're like, "That's going to get infected," so we'll just cut it off before they die of sepsis. Most of the deaths were from disease, though. Like I said, there was smallpox, dysentery, yellow fever, typhus, and whooping cough, and they ran rampant.
Well, does Typhus come with her girlfriend, Typhoid?
Yeah.
Okay.
They come right together.
Yeah, they never go anywhere without each other.
So I'm just going to touch on those really quickly so you know what they are. Smallpox, it affected the colonists more because the British were constantly exposed to it because they kept having outbreaks in England. But over here, these people might have been here their whole life, so they might have not seen an outbreak. So when the smallpox were in the colonies during the war, the British weren't really affected. It was wiping out the colonists.
That's how they killed off half the Native Americans.
So some say the British even used it as the first bioweapon.
Oh, I believe it.
Smallpox is spread by the variola virus. Symptoms include fever, colds, muscle pain, headaches, vomiting, small red spots on the skin, mouth, and tongue. After 2 to 4 days, red pustules will appear on the skin. There is also a chance of blindness.
Didn't George Washington have it like 12 times?
George Washington had it. The big problem with smallpox is that it is easily spread. Mm-hmm. Also, you either have to inoculate people or quarantine people to prevent the spread. And either way, there's soldiers out of the numbers for weeks at a time.
Because it's like a 3-week span. Right.
So you're weakening your army huge when there's a outbreak or you're trying to prevent an outbreak. Eventually, they did agree, Washington agreed, we're going to inoculate the soldiers, which did put them down for a few weeks, but it didn't make them as sick. So when you inoculate, you made an incision on the arm of the healthy soldier, and then you take the pus from the pustules of a sick soldier and rub it into your cut.
So you weren't inoculating, you were just making them sick.
But they would take it from soldiers that were healing.
So it was already
They didn't get as sick. They would get like sick for a couple of days, but not as sick as if they were to get smallpox. Okay. It's like a vaccine.
Yeah.
But they literally took the pus out of their pustules and rubbed it into their cut. So like I said, they got sick, but it wasn't as bad as if they caught it naturally. But again,
that's disgusting.
It took down.
That is disgusting.
Yeah, let me rub this pus into your cut.
Yes, come over here and put your pustules all over my body, please.
Again, it took them down. They were down and out now for like a week or so with the inoculation. But they weren't as sick as if they were to get it. And if they were in a battle and the troops were low anyways, you're not getting inoculated. Like, this group's not getting inoculated. This, like, anything. They change
that's just
with what they need. But it's disgusting. So then there's yellow fever. That's a disease that's carried by mosquitoes. Sweet. They bite monkeys, and then they carry the yellow fever. They bite a human and pass the yellow fever on.
Do we have a lot of monkeys in the United States?
No, I'm assuming they came over with people that they had help fighting for them.
Okay, all right. Because I didn't think we had a big monkey population in the United States.
The symptoms are fever, yellowing of the skin, eyes, and liver.
Is it yellow fever because it's bananas?
Maybe. Or it makes you yellow. You get cold symptoms, you get a stomach ache, nausea and vomiting, you get blood clots, you get delirium, you get spasms, you get gum bleeding. Shit. Yeah. Patients must be hospitalized and they have to be aggressively hydrated to survive. There's dysentery, which is spread through contaminated food and drink and poor hygiene. Symptoms are bloating, bloody diarrhea, cramps, flatulence, vomiting, thirstiness, fever, chills, rapid heart rate, loss of strength.
But I swear I have all those. Flatulence. Bloody diarrhea.
High fever, dizziness, and fainting. And that is treated with bed rest and hydration. So again, you're knocking these troops out for weeks at a time.
Yeah.
And then there's typhus, which is spread through ticks, mites, and flea bites. You get a headache, a rash, and a fever, which appears 1 to 2 weeks after exposure. It's prevalent with poor sanitary conditions. So
everywhere it's dirty, you're getting all the usual suspects show up. Dysentery, typhus, typhoid. Mm-hmm. It's like a lineup.
And then there's whooping cough. Or pertussis is the other name. I had that in high school.
Well, we get vaccinated for it now.
I did. There was an outbreak at the time that I was in high school. My sister got it. So my sister, it was New Year's Eve. In my mother's like 3-season porch with my boyfriend. My mother and my sister in bed. And we hear like boom. Like you could hear somebody running down the front stairs. I'm like, that's weird. And then you heard my front door open. We never used my front door. We used the back door. Mm-hmm. And you heard the front door open and like run out. And I was like, what the F? Like, what is going on? And it was like when Stacy was little, she used to get, what's the thing at night? The cough. Croup. She used to get croup like every winter. And my mother would have me go take her outside until she could get dressed so we could go to the emergency room. So when she woke up, she wasn't breathing. She ran outside to the front door because that's what we used to do when she had croup. And she stood out there. She vomited everywhere. And my mother took her, like, we didn't know what was going on. She's wheezing. She takes her to the hospital. They draw her blood, and they're like, we think she has whooping cough. I'm like, what? Like, how can you have whooping cough? And then, like, a few days later, I wake up at night, not breathing, vomit.
Oh, my God.
Coughing my lungs up. You know, they're like, yep. So they send you blood to, like, the state lab now.
Oh, yeah,
they have to run it. It takes,
and it comes back. And
it takes, like, 2 weeks to come back. And you have to, like, quarantine for 3.
Maybe then, because now it comes back almost immediately.
Oh, no, it was, like, weeks. We didn't know. But they were like, we're pretty sure that's what this is. It was awful. And they give you Phenergan with codeine. They give you cough syrup with codeine.
For how long?
Weeks. You would wake up every night. I mean, you had the cough all day, and then you go to sleep with the Phenergan with codeine. You'd be knocked out, and then you'd wake up in the middle of the night every night. You'd wake up, vomit, and then cough your lungs up. It was awful. It was every night. My poor mother would run into my room all of a sudden, she'd wake me up. She'd go, I thought that was you not breathing. And then she'd have to run into my sisters. It was awful. Every night you would wake up like that. It was terrifying. You would wake up like just choking to death.
I think that vaccine worked.
Yeah. So what happened was there was like an outbreak of it. The pertussis of the vaccine that we got was no good to a bunch of people. Like, it was not good. So there was a little outbreak. We did get the vaccine, but it was when they drew the titer, we had nothing. So we got a booster or something, but we already had it. Anyways, it's awful.
Yeah.
Get vaccinated.
Ain't no joke.
It is no joke. And then my mother was sick, like, after we were sick, but not, adults don't get it like that. You get, like, a sore throat and whatever, but it's...
Kids get it bad.
Kids get it really bad. Anyways, it's highly contagious. It affects the lungs. Early symptoms are like a common cold. You get a runny nose, sneeze, mild cough, fever. After 1 to 2 weeks, the cough worsens. The mucus gets really thick, and it gets in your airways, which results in bursts of rapid coughs. So that's where you get that whooping, like, noise. Patients can turn blue due to lack of oxygen. It prevents you from sleeping. That's why we got the Phenergan with codeine to sleep. Children get very, very ill. Infants often cannot whoop to clear their airways, so they can't even clear their airways. And children often vomit after coughing spells. It is frightening, and the noise it makes, it's awful. Like, you can't, there's no control. You would literally just wake up every night and do it. It was awful. And then you were so sore because
from coughing,
you're whooping all night. And that's all they do is just give you medicine to sleep, because that's all
nothing else you can do.
So that's the diseases that people would really die from. Then, as far as injuries go, the weapons used were muskets, bayonets, and cannonballs, and they're made of lead.
Yeah, not pretty.
There were a lot of burns, lacerations, bullet wounds, and head injuries. Field doctors did not have much training, as I had stated before. They felt like an amputation was safer than to try to salvage a limb, so there were a ton of failed amputations, and then these guys either had no limb or they died of sepsis anyways. They sometimes gave the soldier some wine or some rum or some tobacco juice. But more often than not, they gave them nothing to do these amputations.
Oh my God.
Then they'd have 2 or 3 attendants.
Hold them down. And the surgeon would cut off the limb with a very large knife or a saw. Wow.
Yeah, and that was it. Burns were treated in 2 ways. If you had a superficial burn, just a little backfire from your gun, they throw some wine on it. Because, alcohol kills it.
With all that sugar in it.
And then if you had a full thickness burn, like a real good deep one, they put some lard on it. So just rub some fat over it.
Cook it a little more.
Yeah. So there's this Dr. John Jones.
John Jones.
He's an actual trained physician. With a degree in everything. He served...
He's a bona fide surgeon.
Yeah. He trained over, in France or somewhere. He served in the French and Indian War. And he realized that these field surgeons had, like, 0 experience. So he wrote and published the first American surgical text. It's called The Plain and Concise Practical Remarks on the Treatment of Wounds and Fractures.
And here it is. This is what we do. Plain and concise.
It is... I'm not kidding you when I say, like, if you read some of these excerpts, it's like, okay, so this guy has if he was scalped by the Indians, Native Americans, if it looks like this, you do this. If it looks like this, you do this. And now does it look like this? Because then you do this. It is literal,
precise,
step by step. Like, Sam could go into the field and go, okay, oh yeah, all right, half your scalp is still on, so we should do this. Like, it tells you exactly what to do. So he literally wrote it as a guide so the untrained field surgeons could get a patient, see what the injury was, open to that page in the book, and see step by step what to do. And he wrote it very plainly, so literally anybody.
Plain and concise,
it was
Laura.
plain and concise. Anybody could pick that book up.
Even the title told you what to do.
Plain and concise. Anybody could use it. So you did not need any training or education to use this book. Jones was an advocate of limb salvage because he was in this other war and he saw like, oh, they're just cutting these limbs off and really we should try to save them. He knew how many patients died of shock and sepsis after the failed amputations. So he encouraged the field surgeons to try and debride the wounds with as little soft tissue damage as possible. So like just cut out where the bullet is or
and let it
heal. Right. Just take out that damaged tissue. Try to leave everything else. This was difficult because the lead bullets that they used expanded on impact.
Really?
And then blew apart the tissue in the bone. So the lead bullets made it worse.
I would think they would have just gone in as is.
No, it said it like damaged a lot of the surrounding tissue. So there's a lot of damage. So then they would cut it off. He also taught people to use bark emollient as cautery. So to stop bleeding, they would put this like tree bark emollient on.
Oh my God.
He walked field surgeons through how to do burr holes in this book.
With what?
They had like little
Hudson
drills. It was like a Hudson brace. Yeah. So it's, I'm not kidding you. It, like when you read the stuff he wrote, he was like, okay, if they have a depressed skull fracture, you're going to go ahead and make a burr hole, but don't make it on the edge of the fracture. Put it on the far edge of the fracture and try to push it up. I mean, it's literally exactly what we do today. This guy was telling them what to do in this book. It's amazing because how he knew that stuff. Because then he goes into brain injuries. And he's talking about, the animal spirits that live in your different hemispheres of your brain.
Come on. So he goes from knowing what to do for a depressed skull fracture, and then he goes to the animal spirits.
You can't release the animal spirits into the ventricle. Like, knew there was ventricles and hemispheres.
But then gets into animal spirits.
Yep. But then says, you got to release those animal spirits. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, how he knew how to do burr holes like we still do them today.
And then talk about animal spirits.
It's unreal.
Laura, if you had an animal spirit, what would it be?
I don't know. What would it be?
I don't know. Mine would probably be a honey badger.
Yeah, just don't give a shit. I don't know what mine would be. I think something nice, but would tear your head off. If tested.
Like a cougar?
Koala bear? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
You think I'm nice.
They're vicious. I hear they're real vicious. Go ahead.
And then he had this other part in the book. So soldiers got scalped a lot because the British had the Native Americans working for them.
Yeah, and it was worth money.
Yes, and the Native Americans scalped them. He told them how to re-epithelialize the scalp. Skin. No hair, just scalp. Yeah, just to make sure the scalp regrew. And it would grow back in it took 2 years. But he could get them to get their scalps to grow back. I think that's amazing from the 1700s.
After being scalped?
No, I don't want to. No. However, he could regenerate their scalps in 1775.
I think that's pretty impressive.
It's remarkable.
That's pretty impressive.
So
Mr.
John Jones, I think, is really cool.
I think John Jones is very cool.
I think he's unreal. So I have these little stories.
Why did you just look at me like that?
The 20 terrifying Revolutionary War soldier experiences.
Terrifying. You know what? Why don't we go through my peeps?
Okay, yeah, and then we'll do the stories.
That. All right. Because I think it just... They're not going to fit in afterwards.
Okay.
All right. One of these girls, I don't even know why we talk about her. I shouldn't say that because she did do something cool, but I don't know. Abigail Corbin Peck. Of course, the writing's so small I can barely read it. Okay. Abigail Corbin Peck was... Let's see. She's in Connecticut. I can tell you she's in Connecticut. She's born in Danbury, Connecticut in 1747, and she's married to Phineas Peck. Such a 1700 name, Phineas. Phineas Gage, Phineas Peck. So they get married in 1776, and in 1777, while her husband was away fighting for the Patriots, they drag him away. The British burned down Danbury, Connecticut while she's in it.
I didn't know that.
She brought wounded into her home and cared for them. Some were returned to good health. Others she could only comfort as death approached. So for that, she is known as like a nurse of the of the Revolution.
I was gonna say
in 1816, Phineas, Abigail, and their family moved to Seneca, New York. And in 1857, a widow at the tender age of 90,
Jesus,
Abigail moved west with her family.
What?
By way of
The Oregon Trail?
ox teams on the Oregon Trail. Yep.
She lived in the Revolutionary War in the friggin' Oregon Trail.
She did miss the Donner Party.
Oh, good.
She went after the Donner Party. And she dies in No, that can't be right. She dies at the tender age of 101.
Holy shit.
So what did I say she was born in?
17-something.
She's born in 7, so it has to be 1848 that she dies. They literally wrote 1948.
Oh, okay.
She'd be fucking old if she
Yeah,
died
she'd be real old.
Okay. Then we have Abigail Hartman Rice. She's a Revolutionary War nurse. We're going to paraphrase Abigail Hartman Rice because they really get into Abigail Hartman Rice. So, she comes over from Germany when she's 8 years old with her family.
She's a good stock.
Yes. I gotta get to where she comes over though. All right, because they really get into it. So she comes over with her family. She's aboard the Royal Union in Rotterdam, and she comes and she lands in Pennsylvania on August 15th, along with ships from Portugal, Madeira, and the Caribbean. She was 8 years old. She descends the gangplank alongside her family and sets foot in North America.
Wow.
She moves to Chester County, which is near the Schuylkill River.
Sure.
And her father ends up, he owns like a lot of land. He gets in this big land dispute with them. But she carries on. The Hartman German-speaking neighbors play a significant role in the revolution. Abigail gets and meets Zachariah Rice before her adolescence, and they get married. By the time the 7-Year War started, Zachariah was a young man in his early 20s. In 1757, when she's 16, they marry in a ceremony, and 2 years later, at the age of 18, she delivers her first child, a son named John. Okay. She proceeds to have a shit load of kids, okay? A shit, like 23 kids.
What?
Yeah. I'm not kidding when I tell you a shitload of kids.
Well, she should be written in history. Just
her epitaph will tell you how many she has. So
you didn't put your kids in school back then, though, right?
I don't know what she did, man.
And
I'm wondering if there's any twins in there. I mean, that's a shitload of kids. So it gets on and on about Chester County and the people involved, and they're all running off to the revolution and blah, 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 blah. And the war is getting closer and closer to home. Zachariah gets hurt. He comes home. And they at this point have 15 children.
Jesus Christ.
But he's very politically involved in the revolution. And things are going on, and now they decide to build a hospital about a mile from the Rice family home along Pickering Creek. And it is, I forgot what they call it. I'll get it. It's going to show up somewhere. Oh, here we go. All right. It's the hospital at Yellow Springs. It's about 10 miles from Valley Forge, which we might cover in the wintertime. It was the Continental Army's first permanent military medical facility. Zachariah Rice helped construct the building known as Washington Hall. By the time the hospital was completed, the structure measures 160 feet by 36 feet. On the first floor, a visitor could meet with doctors and nurses in the kitchen, dining room, or one of the utility rooms.
160 feet by 36 feet.
Not very big, but it's a couple floors. Hospital administrators kept soldiers in one of 2 wards on the second floor, or in more private rooms on the third floor. And a 9-foot wraparound porch on the first floor has provided some breathing room to the men cramped indoors. 1,300 patients were treated at Yellow Springs throughout the 6-month encampment. It's about a mile from the Rice family. And Abigail is like, she just starts by going over and she's bringing food to the soldiers and she's helping out with the soldiers.
Because she doesn't have enough to do with 15
Exactly,
kids.
with 15 kids, which is a growing family. And she's just becoming more and more involved with this hospital. Hospital conditions are hard to imagine today. There is primitive knowledge of proper medical procedures, as you talk about, with no conception of germ theory. Life inside was probably appalling, I bet. The illnesses, you have typhoid, like I said, typhus, dysentery, like you said, pneumonia, they're all common. Doctors helped with the nurses frequently performed amputations, especially when frostbite set in during the winter months. But the Yellow Springs struggled to obtain necessary medical supplies. So they're asking for things like blankets, clothing, soap, and liquor. And it would only come at sporadic intervals. So the doctor writes to Continental Congress. He's like, okay, if you don't give us this stuff, this hospital's not going to work. What is happening at the hospital is the women are getting involved. So he writes, they do nothing. The women start bombarding the Continental Congress with, you've got to give us...
They're Karens.
They're wicked Karens. These were like Karens on crack. These were Karens with 23 kids.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay?
Sweet Jesus.
So, he's writing, the nurses are refusing to serve any longer as they have received no pay. They are marginalized society. Society looked down on nurses at this time. People don't realize nurses were crap. Some people still look down on them. So they're writing all this stuff, and by the end of the war, some nurses were earning greater pay than the enlisted men.
Wow.
And the political clout did not stop there. In 1781, Dr. Otto sent a letter to the president of Pennsylvania Assembly requesting the assembly to look into freeing 3 Chester County soldiers. So some of these women had friends who were prisoners of war, and they were able to get them released by writing letters to the Continental Congress. So Abigail Rice is very involved in the Yellow Springs Hospital. While she's there, she contracts typhoid from one of the soldiers. She has had several complications from the illness and was never able to fully recover, though she did have
7 more children.
Yeah. Okay. So, at the time of her death, there are no records to indicate that anyone celebrated or honored her service at Yellow Springs. Nor, for the matter, did anyone seem fit to remember how she traveled to North America and established a life in a foreign land with no connections. But those in her circle did understand the incredible legacy she left behind. When she was laid to rest in the cemetery near St. Peter's Church in Pikeland, her first gravestone read, "Some have children, some have none. Here lies the mother of 21. Jeez. I'm sorry, so correct me. She had 21 kids. So, that is, it goes on and on about her, but...
So she's a mom of 21 kids, and
she helped start this hospital.
Trying to get this hospital.
Yeah, she gets this hospital
rolling.
Jesus. Get that hospital rolling, right. All right. Now we're going to mention who my father claims to be part of my legacy.
Yeah.
General Joseph Warren. Oh. And General Joseph Warren...
Warren's a rare name, so you're probably related.
Well, is it though? So General Joseph Warren was involved in the Battle of Bunker Hill, Laura. All right, let's see. He was something, all right? Okay, he is born in the Roxbury province of the Massachusetts Bay community to Joseph and Mary Warren. He is born... When did you be born? He was born June 11th, 1741. Jesus. They all wear these stupid wigs, and they look like they're 100 years old. He was like 34 when he died. If you look at the picture of him, he looks like he's about fucking 89. Okay. So... his father died while he fell off a ladder while gathering fruit in his orchard. Ooh. Did you know that? No, I bet you didn't.
That doesn't seem like a very high ladder.
He attended Roxbury Latin School. He was enrolled in Harvard in the class of 1759. And then he taught for a year at Roxbury Latin. He studied medicine, and he married 18-year-old heiress Elizabeth Houghton on September 6th, 1764, where she promptly died in 1773, leaving him with 4 children, Elizabeth, Joseph, Mary, and Richard, before his death in 1775. All right, while practicing medicine and surgery in Boston, he becomes extremely involved in politics, which he should have just kept himself to medicine. All right, he is associated with John Hancock, Sam Adams, and all the big guys, riffraff in Boston, Sons of Liberty. He conducted an autopsy on Christopher Sider in February 1770, and was a member of the Boston committee that assembled a report on the following month's Boston Massacre, which was a big scam. So he's writing all this propaganda. He writes A True Patriot, and the British are getting pissed. They don't like it.
He's stirring shit up.
In 1774, he authors the song "Free America," kind of like Lee Greenwood. And I'm proud to be an American.
That was my friend Katie's favorite song.
That's Brian's favorite
for
song.
a million years.
That's Brian's favorite song.
I'm not sure if it's that or Jump Around now, but it was one of them.
And I'm proud. He cries, I think, when he plays. Yep. Then he joined the Scottish Rite Freemasons. He was initiated into the St. Andrew's Lodge. So he's getting very political. All right. He talks about he gives multiple speeches on the Boston Massacre. And he's doing this while it's 1775 now. Boston's occupied by the British Army. They don't like him at all.
No, he's a pot stirrer.
Not at all. So, while he's in Boston, it's now April of 1775. Laura, what happens in April of 1775? Do you remember? Precisely April 18th, we celebrate it with the Boston Marathon.
Lexington and Concord?
Yes! The shot heard round the world. It's the start of the revolution. The Minutemen. Okay.
I don't know that song.
Well, watch Schoolhouse Rock. It's a whole thing. I could go, get your powder, get your gun, report to General Washington. Okay. So, this is getting ready. And he is part of the team that gets together. Sorry, that's my page hitting the thing. He gets together the troops to report to Lexington. So in Lexington and Concord, in case you don't know your history, Sam Adams, John Hancock, the head leaders over in there, the British are coming to arrest them. They send Paul Revere out. They send Dawes out. Tell them that they're coming, get the fuck out of there. That's exactly what happens. So they're unable to arrest them. All right. So Warren, he slips out of Boston early on April 19th. And during that day's Battle of Lexington and Concord, he coordinates and leads militia to fight alongside as the British. So as they're leaving, the British coming back, the fuckers that we're picking them off. Because, they're wearing bright red coats. So as they're coming back to Boston, Warren is one of the guys. He's helping them pick them off as they're coming back to Boston. So the British really don't like him now, okay?
He's a real
During this fighting, he's almost killed as a musket ball strikes part of his wig. Thank God he was wearing that ugly-ass white wig.
Thank God.
When his mother saw him after the battle and heard of his escape, she entreated him with tears, again, not to risk his life so preciously. And you know what he says? Wherever danger is, dear mother, there will your son be. But they talk so weird that it's hard to read it. Now is no time for one's American's children to shrink from the most hazardous duty. I will either set my country free or shed my last drop of blood to make her so. So good. And you wonder where I get it, Laura.
That's a
legacy.
Speech.
You wonder why I'm so goddamn patriotic, okay? I bleed red, white, and blue. And then he turned to recruiting and organizing soldiers for the siege of Boston, because he's something. Okay. So, here he is. He's a surgeon. He's really political now. And he gets commissioned as a major general by the Provincial Congress, June 14th, 1775. Okay. Laura, what's going to happen in June of 1775?
Bunker Hill.
Battle of Bunker Hill. You are so fucking smart. Several days later, in the moments before the Battle of Bunker Hill, he arrives. And he's like, I want to be where the heaviest fighting is. And the generals are like, you're a general. You don't really need to be out there. He's like, oh, no. Where there is freedom, he will be there to set it free, Laura.
Where there is trouble, your son will be.
I will set, where there is the most hazardous duty, I will either set my country free or shed my last blood of drop.
He's front and center.
Well, he sheds his last drop of blood to do so. Okay. So, all right, he wants to know where's the heaviest fighting. I'm there. They point to Breed's Hill, which we all call Bunker Hill, but it's really Breed's Hill is where the fight was. And I don't know if the monument's actually on Breed's Hill or Bunker Hill, but it's up there. So he joins the fighting as a private against the wishes of General Putnam and Colonel William Prescott. And if you go to Revere, where I grew up, all these streets are named after these guys. So they're like, dude, really? Really? He's like, nope, this is what I'm doing. And he's not really experienced in war, so he doesn't really know what he's doing.
He's a doctor.
He's a doctor, politics. And he really should have stayed on the sides. So, but he's out there. He's inspiring his men. Hold rank, because at the Battle of Bunker Hill, we're totally overwhelmed. Don't fight. We have no army. We have no ammunition. That's the famous line: "Don't shoot till the whites of their eyes," because you had to wait and save your ammunition. We're fucked, and everybody's gonna die. He doesn't give a shit. He's like a honey badger too. These fellows say we won't fight! Exclamation point. By heavens, I hope I shall die up to my knees in blood. Well, he gets his wish. Okay. So he fights until the ammunition and what remains runs out. The British make their final assault on the hill. He fights long enough to give some of the troops time to escape, and he's killed instantly by a musket or a pistol ball in the head by a British officer who knows who he is.
Oh.
So they're like, oh, this is a little fucking shit. I'm going to get him. Boom.
Is that Warren over there?
Here's that Warren, little prick. I'm going to shoot him 2 to the back of the head. Boom. Done. Musket ball. He's all set. This account is supported by a 2011 forensic analysis. After he shot 2 to the back of the head, boom, boom, his body was stripped of clothing and he was bayoneted until unrecognizable and then shoved into a shallow ditch. I got a page flip.
I mean, I
Yes.
get he was fighting for the country, but it sounds like a pain in the
This Captain Walter Laurie, he really hated him. He said he stuffed the scoundrel with another rebel into one hole, and there he and his seditious principles may remain. Well, guess what, fucker? We won. So he's now got a monument over there, and he's got buildings and streets, and me named after him. So, in a letter to John Adams, Benjamin Hitchborn describes the damage that the British Lieutenant James Drew of the sloop Scorpion inflicted on Warren's body 2 days after the Battle of Bunker Hill. And a day or two after, Drew went upon the hill again, opened the dirt that was thrown over Dr. Warren. He must have really been an asshole.
he sounds like a
Wait, so he opens the grave, spits in his face, jumped on his stomach, and at last cut off his head and committed every act of violence upon his body. Dude, he's dead. He's, at this point, 3 days into decomposition.
Get over it.
Now you're going to spit in his face. Jump on his stomach? Like, you must have been...
gross.
They must have really hated him.
Yeah, he must have done something else.
That's what us Warrens do to people. That's what we can run under his skin. His body was exhumed 10 months after his death by his brother and Paul Revere, who identified the remains of the artificial tooth he had placed in the jaw. You know what? I have one too. We're simpatico, me and him. His body was placed in the Granary Burying Ground and later in 1825 at St. Paul's Church before finally being moved in 1855 to his family's vault in Forest Hills. So, he leaves behind his fiancée, Mercy Scully, in Worcester. She flees to Worcester because if they did that to him, imagine what they were going to do to her. She looks after his kids, and she gets support for their education from Hancock, Sam Adams, Mercy Otis, Benedict Arnold.
Oh, the traitor.
Asshole that he is. And the Continental Congress. His younger brother, an apprentice in medicine, John Warren, served as a surgeon during the Battle of Bunker Hill and the rest of the war. And afterwards, John Warren founds Harvard Medical School, and he's a co-founder of the Massachusetts Medical Society. His son starts the Warren Building in Mass General. He's one of the founders of Mass General.
So what you're trying to tell me is that your father told you you're one of the founders of Mass General.
He did.
Okay.
And I think I should get more. I think if I was to work there, I should get more pay.
Yeah.
So his name is everywhere, clearly. 14 states have a Warren County named after them. Additionally, Warren, Pennsylvania, Warren, Michigan, Warren, New Jersey, Warrenton, Missouri, Warrenton, Virginia, Warren, Maine, Warren, Massachusetts. I hope Massachusetts would have had a Warren.
You would hope.
Let's just say, I'm not going to get in the rest of it. He was something.
Okay.
He was such a fucker. They hated him so much. They went back 3 days later, dug him up, and jumped on his body, cut his head off, and spit in his face. Now, I wonder, did he spit in his face first, or did he pick it up and spit in his face hand to hand?
I think that's what
And
I
then
would
what
have
did
done.
he do
I'm
with
going to cut it off.
I mean, I wouldn't want to lean over to that gaseous.
No, I would pick the head up, I think.
And just right in his face. Okay.
Yeah.
I wonder what else he did to that. I mean,
all
manners of shit. You know, there was some spewing on that body.
Oh, God.
You know there was.
No,
I'm sorry.
I don't
Go
know.
ahead. Laura, take it away take us through the end of the revolution. We're going to get our independence. Take us through what these guys did to get us.
So this article was in the Journal of the American Revolution. 20 terrifying Revolutionary War soldier experiences. They weren't all very terrifying, I didn't find. But
Was one of them just like, I don't know, woolen breeches?
yeah, some of them were like, I'm like, oh.
Was that though?
Was it
really?
terrifying?
Not
I'm
so
not
much.
sure.
I'll tell you terrifying.
So, some of them accidentally soldiered too hard.
What does that even mean?
I don't know. So John Carney was a late private soldier in the 9th Pennsylvania Regiment. He was 35 years old. He's made to appear to this court. This is like what the paper says. that he lost his eyesight by reason of severe duty and hardship he underwent in the Army of the United States. So they just said,
what do you do when they made you go blind?
I don't know. There's things that your grandmother tells you to do that make you go blind.
Yeah, exactly.
Handling a firearm for most of these soldiers was something they were doing for the first time when they enlisted. They had never shot a gun
I
before.
find that hard to believe in 1776.
Yeah, but if you were living in Boston, what are you handling a gun?
Not unless you're like a hoity-toity. If you're a farmer, you're handling farm. You're handling
in
guns.
Boston, though?
I don't know. I mean, they had cows in the fucking Boston Commons.
Yeah. People were shot by themselves or their comrades in arms enough times that it warranted attention from George Washington.
Imagine he'd be like, Jesus Christ, how do I fight a battle with this kind of shit?
The petition of Simon Gore was read, setting forth that the petitioner has been a private in Captain Thomas Palmer's company of rifle militia of the city last summer campaign, that by the accidental discharge of a rifle, the ball and wiper thereof passed through both the petitioner's thighs and most terribly shattered the bone of one. So he shot himself through both of his legs and shattered the bone.
I'm trying to envision how he did
They had no idea how to handle guns. They were shooting each other more than they shot enemies.
Shit.
Yeah.
And yet we still won.
It's unbelievable.
How bad was the British Army that we still won?
Yeah. Frostbite.
Oh, you saw that coming.
Yeah.
Valley Forge.
This is a little note. To Michael Tudor, late, a soldier in the Pennsylvania Regiment commanded by Captain Blank and Company, that he lost his feet by the severity of the winter on the lines in 1777 under Colonel Morgan. So they're writing to whoever to try to get compensation for these guys. To John Thompson, late, a sergeant of Captain Dalbert's company in the 2nd Pennsylvania Regiment, aged about 50 years. God, dude was 50 fighting in the war.
Yeah. Well, it was an important war, Laura.
I know. That he was transferred from his said regiment to the Regiment of Invalids. And discharged. Literally a regiment of invalids.
You're going to the invalids? All right, you're going to the guy who's blind from too much work. The guy who shot himself through the legs.
Discharged from the
Regiment they didn't want him either?
Of Invalids as unfit for further duty, either in the garrison or in the field, on account of his disability occasioned by a frost, in laying out in camp in a hard winter, whereby he is rendered incapable of getting a livelihood by labor. I'm thinking he lost his toes. Couldn't walk.
Maybe a nose, maybe a fingertip.
To Christopher Barris, late, a private in the 10th Pennsylvania Regiment, and from thence transferred to the Regiment of Invalids. Again.
Oh, I want to see this regiment, I'm telling you.
I don't want to see this
You know
regiment.
what? You know when you see the 1776, you see the guy bandaged up, one's playing the fife. Yeah, that's what they came from the Regiment of Invalids. You know what I mean?
This dude was also discharged for the Regiment of
they didn't want him either.
On account of a wound received by a stroke of a broad axe.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Who's fighting with an axe?
I mean, you gotta use what you got. You don't have ammunition, use the axe. That's why I got one laying up at the top of the stairs.
She does literally have an axe at the top of the stairs. It's a little scary.
I literally have no idea why that's
I was getting a little nervous coming down to the boardwalk.
I get nervous every time I see it. I don't know why I say it.
Mike doesn't strike me as an axe kind of guy.
I don't know why I say it. Anyways.
Mike, what's with the axe? Okay.
So this guy, George Parker, was in the 6th Pennsylvania Regiment, about 24 years old. He received a hurt in his leg in erecting huts at James's Island in South Carolina. He hurt his back lifting.
No, he doesn't want to do it anymore. Yeah. He's tired. He's hot.
Was putting up tents, hurt his back.
Nondescript leg pain. It's going to put him out of work for a long time.
This guy, William Marris, was a soldier in the 2nd Battalion of Militia in 1776. While on actual service, he contracted a most violent cold in his head, which concentrated in his right eye and obliged him to leave camp, which was then at Bristol, and return to the city of Philadelphia.
These guys are stretching.
To be cured.
These guys are reaching. He's a reaching.
And
he had a little conjunctivitis and he had to go home.
Yeah, he had a cold in his eye.
Yeah, I don't want him anyway.
And after undergoing a variety of medical treatments by several eminent surgeons at great expense, he was at last obliged to suffer the operation of having his eye taken out. Abraham Bate was a late corporal in the 10th Pennsylvania Regiment. He was wounded in the leg by an axe cutting wood. Afterwards, wounded in the other leg the day of the Battle of Brandywine.
Brandywine.
John Filter of the 10th Regiment, enlisted by Captain Dawson, was drafted as a blacksmith. He was 33 years old, and he was bruised in the breast while shoeing a Continental horse.
Well, because the horse kicked him.
Yeah.
He wants compensation for that.
Yeah.
Call Morgan and Morgan.
John Smith.
Oh, can we come up with a better name than John Smith?
He's a non-commissioned officer. He was about 45 years old.
He's
On
old.
the 4th of July in 1780, was disabled by the rammer of a cannon at a rejoicing fire at a sunbury in the county of North.
So they're
Cumberland.
celebrating. We're almost
So
there.
they're
but we're not
lighting
there.
off the cannons because they're celebrating, and it backfires into them.
Okay.
God love him. Hugh McSwain was a late Marine in the galley service.
Well, the Marines were awful early at that
I
time.
know,
They
I
didn't
don't
start till
understand
76.
Aged about 60 years.
He's a 60-year-old Marine. Jeez, they were taking anybody then, weren't they?
He was wounded in the loins
Oh, I bet he was. Called
by a
syphilis.
splinter of wood
Oh,
occasioned by a shot from Augusta ship of war the day she was blown up in the river of Delaware in 1777, which renders him incapable of getting a support by labor.
What?
He was hurt so bad with this piece of wood in his loins that he can no longer work.
My loins! It's in my loins!
No, from my loins.
James Brannan, a late private in the 2nd Pennsylvania Regiment, aged about 35, found that he was wounded in the groin in an attack on
Not
a
the loins
blockhouse.
this time, just the groin.
This is just the groin. He pulled a groin.
Pulled a hammy.
This dude, Thomas Carahan, 61.
We were struggling, dude. I can't believe we won this war.
Was wounded the night before the Battle of Brandywine.
Oh, Brandywine was something.
By the enemy's light horse, and as he fell, was trampled under the horse's feet and bruised all over.
Oh, I bet he was.
Mm-hmm.
Must have been some horse.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they are pretty big.
William Richie was blinded by the powder springing in his eyes from a cannon on the 27th of November, 1777. See, these don't say, like, none of them seem really bad to me.
I don't know. I don't think I'd really be blinded by gunpowder.
No.
Or have my loins have a stick in them.
I know, but, I mean, really.
But really?
Samuel Smith, a late private soldier in Captain John Harris's company, was 32 years old. He received a wound by a cannonball at the Battle of Brandywine that shot his left thigh, whereby he lost his leg and thigh.
I'm surprised he didn't lose his life.
Yeah, so he is dead. So
well, it's also 200 years later.
Yeah, I'm not sure. No, but these are like from notes, like
other
that
people
they
that
sent
died
to the court. Another example of cannonball versus leg was about Abraham Best. He was a late
big
private
name back then.
in the 6th Pennsylvania Regiment. He was about 30 years old. On the 4th day of October in the year 1777, he lost his leg by cannonball in the action at Germantown in the service of the United States. Edward Killen was a soldier in the 5th Pennsylvania Battalion. He was wounded at the capture of Fort Washington in the thigh, the hand, the right foot, and in the testicles.
Oh, that was the money shot.
And that's about it. A lot of them got hit in the loins, apparently.
Oh, the loins might have been pretty big at that time. I mean, if you ever seen those pants, all you could see were freaking loins.
What are they?
With the flap in front, the 13 stars.
Yeah. Pantaloons.
Pantaloons. Pantaloons. I can't. So couldn't do more on a tractor.
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well.
Mm-hmm.
There's your revolution.
Yeah.
May we never cover it again.
No.
Yeah, the badass Warren who didn't know what the hell he was doing, but was like, just kill me. I love this
I'm
war.
going to die.
I am so
in this
patriotic.
war."
Just kill me. And these other guys are like, I have a cold. I gotta go home.
I have a cold in my eye. Could you remove?
Could you remove it, please? Do we have any emails we could cover?
We have one email.
Mm-hmm.
It says, hello, ladies.
Hi.
I stinking love your podcast.
And I stinking love you.
I'm a nursing student from the great state of South Dakota, and I love to hear about the real world of nursing from you two absolutely hilarious ladies. I have learned so much on so many random topics, and I love it. I like how you keep the podcast so conversational and fun. I can't wait to hear more. Keep up the good work. Haley. Thanks, Haley.
I have to say, Haley, you're the second person I know from South Dakota. I didn't think anybody lived out there.
Really?
Carmen's from South Dakota.
Oh, she's from?
Hi, Carmen.
Hi, Carmen.
Like born and raised in Harold, South Dakota.
Oh, I think I know.
Yeah.
Maybe we should go visit.
I landed in South Dakota for 10 minutes.
That doesn't count.
I saw a tornado shelter, and I got in a car, and I drove back to Boston.
That was nice.
Yeah, and it's flat out there.
Really?
Ain't a lot to see.
I heard it was beautiful.
Maybe where there's mountains, where I was flat.
Yeah, what was flat?
Like the ground. There's like maybe a tree that I saw the whole time.
Really? I thought it was supposed to be like gorgeous out there.
In South Dakota, North Dakota, the plains. Yeah,
I
not
don't know why I thought the Dakotas was supposed to be beautiful.
Somebody's pulling your leg.
Maybe.
Haley, tell us.
Yeah,
Carmen, tell
write
us.
us in.
South Dakota beautiful? Because it didn't look too beautiful to me for the 5 minutes I was there.
I heard it was beautiful.
Yeah, whatevs. Well, Haley, thank you for writing in, and we love our write-ins, as you can see. We read almost anything that's written in, because it makes me happy. So feel free to send us more emails. We enjoy every stinking one of them.
Yes.
Thank you again for listening. We're on the Everyday Heroes podcast network, which is a lot of cops and fire and military. Right up this Revolutionary War episode. I think should join in. So we're still taking, ideas for shows, taking emails. Talk to us, love us. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
Have a very safe 4th of July. Please do not play with fireworks.
Don't light anybody's hair on fire with fireworks.
That would be so bad. Those sparklers are way more dangerous than they look.
Yep.
Keep the grills away from the side of the house.
Please.
And
don't go near the propellers of boats.
Yes, I mean, just be safe.
Come on.
And then we've got some more chaos, death, and mayhem coming up for the summer series.
Yeah.
Happy 4th of July.
Bye.
Bye.
Like, subscribe, rate, and review the Scissors and Scrubs podcast on whatever podcast app you listen to us on. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Scissors and Scrubs. And email us any of your stories or thoughts to scissorsnscrubs@gmail.com.